I know. People are really excited about the proposed armor changes, and I am harshing the vibe. But I'm with everyone else. I think these changes are really cool and a huge step in the right direction. But, all things equal, if it was implemented as is tomorrow, Payday 3 armor rework would suck. There is a game-breaking problem with the new armor that isn't being discussed, and there are many underlying issues I want to spotlight. So that's my thesis coming into this. But before I get into design talk, do we even understand what the rework means? The blog was really confusing because the mechanic itself is convoluted, and the various misinterpretations I've seen from everyone are a good opportunity to just reintroduce the rework altogether. Armor has been a contentious issue since launch exactly a year ago, so this change has been a long time coming. Armor used to serve as your main health bar that you had a limited amount of refills for per game. Then 6 months later, we got adaptive armor, which was weaker with the potential to be unlimited, but it usually wasn't. This rework introduces a new third armor called Shield that is weaker again, but will always refill itself, so it is unlimited. It also lets you combine the armor types you bring, and gives you bonuses and debuffs depending on how much armor you bring, between 1 and 4 chunks that each are as good as an additional bar of health. Based on that alone, you might be thinking, wow, the bonuses and downsides must be crazy to permit players to choose between 1 and 4 additional health bars. And to that I say, we'll get to that. Bear with me because there is so much depth to cover across a couple graphics. First look at this table. I'll break down each column as fast as I can. So you have to regenerate armor, and you do so instantly after a certain amount of time without taking damage. No matter how many chunks you bring, your regen starts at 0 seconds, and it's the type of armor you bring that increases it from these mentioned. Normal armor loses max HP every time it's hit, but regens fastest. Adaptive doesn't lose max HP, but regens half a second slower, as you see in this second table. And Shield regenerates even when broken, but another second slower. Where it gets confusing is that this regen time is cumulative. If you have 4 normal chunks, but 3 are broken, you're still waiting 6 seconds to heal just that 4th chunk. And if you have 4 shield chunks, well, that's 12 seconds without taking damage to regain up to 4 chunks. But that math is a little shocking, right? You have one barely stronger health bar regenerating in 6 seconds, or 4 health bars for 12? This is me sowing the seeds for my argument later. I still want to cover every aspect of the mechanics and draw a bigger picture before I pick at each one. So, moving on, you also always start with 6 possible downs, which of course you go down when your true final HP bar goes to 0. You lose downs for each chunk you bring, and also depending on which chunk, since normal only removes 1 down each, instead of 2 like the other chunks. You can actually go into the negative downs with 4 shield or adaptive, which is a bit silly, and the devs clearly found explaining how this works a nightmare. Basically, you always round up to 1 down. Payday 2 reference. Normal chunks aside, bringing at least 3 of either plate already zeroes you out, so it's hard not to default to 1 down, and they specify skills won't add downs after rounding up either. So it's weirdly very likely you'll end up with only 1 down before you're at risk of custody. Speed penalty, very straightforward. The more chunks you have, the slower you will be. We never see raw numbers on movement speed, so it's hard to tell how this impacts it, so I'll just be ignoring it altogether. Movement speed has never been an issue, and there's always transporter to make up for being too slow anyway. You'll get a specific passive ability depending on the number of chunks you have. Also pretty simple, though I did see some people closer to Starbreeze assuming you could choose your passives at any time. I doubt that because that's not how tables work. But either way, it should be that way, full stop. The passives are already catered to their chunks, so letting players choose less optimal ones is interesting, and letting them choose optimal ones is satisfying, so this should be a choice. You also gain or lose the amount of ammo you can hold based off the number of chunks you have. I find this to be a weird wrinkle because ammo is not an issue in the game currently, so they're bouncing around nothing. In fact, they updated the game earlier this month and completely rewrote the ammo tables so that most guns pick up more ammo. So they made it even easier. I'm not going to mention this later, so I'll just say now, I think these numbers are arbitrary and pointless until we get significant ammo changes, and they should avoid committing to arbitrary numbers until then. Even then, balance-wise, why would players with less armor be punished by having less ammo? It's just flavor. Don't balance around flavor. Finally, you lose consumable slots based on the amount of chunks you have, and consumable slots hold either aid kits or armor repair kits to fix your health or broken chunk instantly at a moment's notice. Not a huge deal either way. And the actual last point, not on this table, but a third table, is that each armor type has its own damage resistance. This is a very important element to discussing the balance, but in its current state, it doesn't really motivate me. I don't have the actual numbers, but with some math magic I'll put on screen, let's assume all chunks equate to 100 HP. And so, on a literal sense, damage resistance gives you an effective health, calculated like this, which equates to shield having 100 HP, adaptive having 110-ish HP, and normal having 140-ish HP. I will be using HP values instead for this video because it's clearer. I'll mention again later why I think it's the better way to calculate armor. I digress. There are two ways to think about this. You can lose 400 HP with 4 shield chunks before needing to regen, or you can bring 4 normal chunks and technically bring 120 total HP more than 4 shields, but you can only take 100 HP before you need to regen to avoid breaking a chunk, and your actual normal armor's max HP is reduced each time, which means it quickly stops being as effective. You can see the framing I'm going for here. With all of that established, let's address the game breaker. So, remember that little thing I said about how 4 shield chunks regenerating at 12 seconds seemed kind of unfair? Various armor skills exist to eschew the perils of regen time, and the most alarming one is Played Up. Off the bat, I just want to hedge my bets. This skill says it only regenerates 1 chunk. But that's what it said since launch, and according to the blog, you always regenerate all of your shield chunks, even in edge cases. So I just want to pose the thought, what if it regenerates all 4 shield chunks at once? I mean, you'd be unkillable. It's not even funny. Oh, okay, that's enough thinking. Hopefully that doesn't come to pass. Even if it's correctly implemented, I think Played Up is the most problematic skill, along with Hardy. Before Shield, Played Up's biggest challenge in practice is that you were at risk of breaking your adaptive chunk before you could regen it, which is no longer possible with Shield. Go ahead and turn your brain off. Played Up essentially regens you for 100 HP every 2 seconds. You can ignore this requirement about getting grit because tank guarantees grit, and you can ignore this requirement about picking up ammo because replenish guarantees ammo. So again, safe to assume you regen 100 HP every 2 seconds. That's your baseline, and that is crazy. I mean, in comparison, this other skill that's already in the game and is beloved and commonly used gives you 5 HP per kill. Unless you're flopping out tactical nukes every 2 seconds, you are not getting the 10 kills per second to rival Plate Up. It's grossly unbalanced even with one shield chunk, which by the way, if you only bring one chunk, you can also take this 5 HP per kill skill. In isolation, in any situation, shield plus Plate Up breaks things. The question that might have come up on your mind if you're really paying attention to that last point is, well, is it guaranteed to regen you 100 HP? I mean, if you've played Plate Up with Adaptive, for example, you never regen all 110 HP in one burst because that means your plate is broken. And usually, you're just going to heal anywhere between 100 and 10 of your adaptive chunk with Plate Up. Which is still huge, but, you might break it if you push your luck, so you try not to. Well, shield doesn't involve any losing, so you can let your entire chunk break before you regen it, but Plate Up's dicey wording could mean that when you, for example, have 2 shields and one fully broke, you either regen a full plate here from 0 to 100 because it's the only chunk that needs to be regenerated, and you could call that your current chunk, or it won't do anything because this full chunk is technically your quote-unquote current chunk, which would be kind of lame, but at least it's not so busted. If it's the former though, and even if it's not, shield is troubling for another reason. Enter Hardy, to break things even more. Let's first pretend Plate Up doesn't work at all. Hardy will give you 2 seconds of immunity every time a chunk breaks. This was an innocuous skill because other chunks are expensive. You aren't exactly breaking them for fun. But shield chunks, you can burn through those. If you have 4 shield chunks, that's 8 seconds of invulnerability, plus however long it takes for your next chunk to break in the meantime, which let's say adds 4 more seconds. You spend 12 seconds without spending any resources, just running out in the open. There is no downside. Do whatever you want, go where you want to go, and then take a 10-second break to regen and go again. Which is a hefty price to pay, I can't lie, but if anything, that sounds like the worst of both worlds. A ridiculously long invulnerability time to bulldoze through heists, and then an incredibly boring wait before you can do it all over again. Needless to say, Hardy plus shield is half-baked. Now this part is more fantasy, but if Plate Up truly regens your fully broken chunk from 0 to 100, if you combine this with Hardy, you get a rhythm game. You break a chunk, you have 2 seconds of invulnerability, you get a kill during that window, your 2 seconds of invulnerability end, and you are exactly where you started with full armor, and Plate Up will refresh to do it over again in time. It's literally infinite health. You just chain a kill every 2-ish seconds. Amazing. The only way that Hardy could not be broken is if shields don't count as breaking. Like if you deplete a full chunk of shield, it's not actually broken, but then that disables a lot of other armor skills, and I think it's also very lame. I think both, if they don't change Hardy or Plate Up at all, and just change how they interact with shield in the back end, I think it would be very lame in both cases. So as you can see, Hardy and especially Plate Up are rife with loopholes that make the introduction of shield problematic. Even if the devs do their due diligence to patch these up and pick the best case scenario, I still see Hardy needing a rework and Played Up isn't far off. So that's the big problem I wanted to put front and center, but I have many other issues with the design of this armor rework. So let's get dissecting. Firstly, the blog specifies the general mechanics of how this works are unlikely to change, but the numbers are subject to change, and I embrace that in all of my feedback throughout this video. I aim to give actionable and reasonable advice to every problem I point toward. Let's just jump into the point I left a pin in earlier. 4 normal chunks versus 4 shield chunks. The former is 570 HP and the latter is 400 HP. But you can spend the 400 HP whenever at 0 cost, and the 570 HP is refilled by dwindling armor bags that you have to waste skills improving. I mean, if you wanted to spend 4 normal chunks, you'd burn half of your only bag. Now, if you don't want to spend any armor plates and just regen it, instead you're only working with 140 HP. Plus, normal plates diminish, so once you've lost about 100 HP and try to regen it, your new max HP that you'll regen up to is probably more like 115 HP, and it's going to continue getting worse and harder to regen. So maybe don't even bother with normal. What about adaptive? You have 110 HP now, just 10 more than one shield chunk provides, and your situation is that you take about 100 HP damage and stop to regen it, or you could just bring 4 shield and have 400 HP to blow, no frills, and your regen time wouldn't be that much longer than with adaptive. I guess I'm branching off into 2 points here, so let's hone in on the redundancy, the futility of bringing or not bringing shield first. As I just said, if you're dealing with shield at all, it means you're dealing with every shield chunk, up to the first non-shield chunk. So on one side, a normal and 2 shields. This is 200 HP priced in, and another 140 HP that is volatile. You lose 200 HP for free before you worry about this 140 at all. And it's the same if you had adaptive or just had all shields, and what's volatile instead is your HP. On the other side, anything non-shield. It's always just going to be the volatile HP without the priced-in padding of a shield provides. If you ask me at this point, I just think adding shield at all is just incompatible, but I want to make it work, so let's keep pushing. Our problem then, to get on the same page, is that despite chunks being so customizable, you actually only have 2 reasonable choices, or well, 3. Either you bring a normal or adaptive alone as your only chunk, or you bring either of those and add as many shield chunks as you want, or you just only bring any amount of shield chunks because they are better and you don't have to invest any skill points to make them work. There is a glaring redundancy to the system, and that's that stacking normal or adaptive together has never made sense since the beginning of the game. Since the armor up nerf, up nerf, up nerf, up nerf. Holy, that's where it started. And shield exposes that redundancy best because it actually has synergy when stacked. You are gaining something from a chunk even after it's broken for the first time, so of course you'll fit some. I guess the system can't be perfect, but all I see is wasted design space. Shield is an essential take in most situations, and for the other reason I'll divulge into now, objectively better. I know there are other elements at play, but I wanted to examine this in isolation because I really don't think downs or region time are significant enough to deny this fact. Armor resistance numbers are all way too close together and low. Firstly, as I said in my example earlier, normal armor stacks impressively at 42 extra HP per chunk, sure, but using it to tank hits is worthless versus shield, and using it to regen is worthless because it quickly takes enough trauma damage to be worse than adaptive. And adaptive is also worthless versus shield because why am I wasting my time waiting for this chunk that's only 10 HP larger to regen when I could gain all 4 of my fat shield chunks in a line in around the same time? And I'll repeat, if you're bringing adaptive or normal, you're also bringing armor skills to refill those chunks, which is a waste of skill points versus shield. I solved it. The system came pre-optimized. There is so much depth and customization to this system, but it's a farce. The balance doesn't permit it. Here's how you start to reel things back. First of all, toss the percent resistance because it's going to complicate players' understanding of the game and calculations, and for what? Just make the values genuinely HP based as the health bars they are. Look at Rainbow Six Siege, they used to do exactly this. Especially if you look at Rook armor, which gives you damage resistance. Now, all the armor resistance has become HP, and so does Rook's armor give you more HP. Then, for actually balancing this damage resistance, double their size, maybe triple them, maybe reduce shield's value to below 100 HP. For example, if shield is only 50 HP, I still think it'd be very viable, and it'd be so far from the other values currently that I would feel compelled to bring an adaptive or normal chunk first, and choose those chunks over shield on one chunk builds. The numbers right now beg any kind of radical change really because 30% resistance means one normal chunk lasts 42% longer than one shield chunk, and I'm losing 4 shield chunks all the time and refilling them for free. So a chunk I have to pay for better be sucking me off. Moving on, the down situation is very alarming to me. The overarching theme of my analysis of the armor rework is that it's insane to bring 4 chunks that regenerate simultaneously. The upside is incomparable to any downside, but there is a big downside, at least compared to one chunk, and that's that you are guaranteed to only have one down. That is a very lame way to balance the give and take. I mean, no one really liked one down in Payday 2. It was bad enough to be severed into its own modifier. And the recurring theme for change in Payday 3 is that players want a more casual experience than what launch served up. Only being able to be revived once per life is unforgiving. It's very boring, too. What would happen to team play? Whether it's because people are dropping like flies or never using that down, I'll never pick a teammate up again. I mean, suddenly making a mistake and going down is what breathes life into the game. It flips the script and reroutes your plan on a 30-second timer to help your team. It's thrilling, and it's being flushed down the toilet here. But what do we do about this rigid design? 6 downs is so little wiggle room to work with, but if they increase the starting amount of downs, then you can just bring one chunk and go down like 10 times. It'd get ridiculous. They could put an upper limit on downs, but I think that'd be a lame solution and add more nonsense like this. Here's my genuine opinion. Remove the 4th chunk. Even before this rework, I couldn't shake that having a 3rd and 4th chunk option was redundant, merely a why not shrug to keep them into this rework. Balance has come so far from when those options debuted on launch, and I reject the idea that we even need a 4th chunk. or ever did. It's just too much overhead for all the balancing. With 3 chunks, there is a clear balanced option between 2 extremes, and the devs can form a clear plan to balance around that. Don't just add a 4th chunk because it was there before you started designing the rework. Having 2 balanced options doesn't make sense, and I don't see any effort to make it make sense here. Here's everything that's automatically improved by a 3 chunk limit. Regen times aren't so comically high. Starting at 1 down feels like a choice, and going to negative down is impossible. This consumable slot discrepancy is solved if anyone cares. And most importantly, the dev team won't be balancing around the possibility that players have 4 chunks at every given time. 4 is a nonsense inclusion that simplifies everything when removed. One more jig, one more major issue. The regen times. I mean, come on. I've grinned and bared it for the entire video, but no. I cannot sincerely pretend I am fine with a 10-second wait. It's just ridiculous. Oh, it's your choice to bring force shield. No, I think what I've been circling around with each problem I find with the rework is that the system should encourage good mechanics. Right now, with shield in its ridiculous state, it's encouraging Doog mechanics. It's encouraging a 10-second wait to capitalize on its crazy HP pool. It's only encouraging shield, and shield adds ridiculous regen time. And while a smidge high regen time adds some tension, 10 seconds is just awkward. Like, the nurse told me they were taking my blood sample 5 seconds ago, and I still haven't felt the needle. What are we waiting for? I was literally just blowing things up and eating a barrage of bullets, and now I'm in a corner of a room checking my phone until I can go back to playing the game. Like the down system, this seems half-baked, but instead of butchering the fundamental balance, it's just disrespecting the player's time. I wouldn't be surprised if people avoid stacking shield just because it's so boring to wait so long. What do I suggest instead? I mean, don't make me say it, but we might seriously have to consider bringing back Payday 2's suppressive fire or something to make regen times dynamic, so they're stopped by something interesting besides damage, so there's still tension, but it's not ridiculously long. That, and then just make the chunks regenerate individually, honestly. That way, you regen 1 broken shield chunk in 3 seconds, no matter how many you brought and how many are broken. Short regen times would fit suppressive fire since your windows to regen will be smaller. And would anyone really mind if you could bring 4 normal chunks, but every chunk individually regenerated at 1.5 seconds speed? It sounds a little absurd, and maybe we could tweak that timer, but it's not like normal is giving the other chunks a run for their money. And then shield is way more balanced too. It acts like Payday 2's Anarchist perk deck, where it returns over time in chunks. Honestly, I sold myself on this. Like, I just thought of this, like, oh my god. Yeah, why wasn't this always the plan? Everyone should be happy with this. We should do this. In summary, and there's a lot to summarize, Played Up and Hardy have several balance loopholes with shield that will break the game. The 3 armors should get massive tweaks to their max HP. Let's remove the 4th chunk altogether, and make chunks regen speed individual, not cumulative. And while we're doing all this, make sure the passives are optional all around, and that ammo capacity per chunk is tossed as a mechanic for now. There's one more big takeaway that's not necessarily a problem with balancing, but a core design failure that Payday 3 is barreling towards. They're poaching every mechanic that defines their game. Replenish removes the need to pick up ammo, which inherently removes the need to position properly so you can hold a room forever. Ammo funnel removes the need to reload, which inherently means unlimited kill potential as you can never be overrun by enemies. And look on screen, I could go on and name many other skills, and here are my reasons for each one. And now shield removes the need to manage armor resources. You used to be encouraged to preserve armor for pushing objectives or helping teammates, but now it's been turned into an incredibly boring constant. And with ammo still being a non-issue, this leaves players with no reason but to take medic bags and invest skill points there because, there's no reason to bring armor bags either. The game is getting shallower, and for over a decade, even with Payday 2's guiltiest and most absurd features, people have made the same mistake they do now, falling for the same fallacy. That it's fine because you can just choose not to take these mind-numbing aspects into a heist, but that choice isn't real. The latest patch already upped enemy spawns in reaction to the community rejecting an ammo funnel nerf. People were complaining the newest heists were overjuiced on the spawn rate, but that's every heist now, and it's because they don't want you to kill an entire wave of enemies before the next one spawns by yourself, even if you have ammo funnel, which means you definitely don't stand a chance without it. And with a new difficulty confirmed, it's clear the dev team's intent is to make everything difficult to account for their inability to nerf things. With that balancing, your only option is to take the strongest things to compete on the highest difficulty, a direct repeat of Payday 2's redundant highest difficulty, and one down no less. I don't think I need to explain how it's conceptually redundant for Payday to designate a difficulty just for playing the game a certain way, yet that's where we're going. Again. Maybe Elmir and Andreas can course correct. The armor rework may be the last thing Mio controlled before stepping down as lead designer, and while he continuously pushed creative solutions to solve issues like this one, I can't say they or anything else during his tenure was particularly balanced as the year went on, but I also see Elmir and Andreas as the embodiment of Payday 2's ideas, that they can't get Payday 3 out of 2's shadow, but they certainly know something about balancing Payday 2, and very well could push the game further into this design hole. And the community has to look within themselves and decide if they literally just want Payday 2 to, flaws and all, or if they'd actually embrace a necessary rebalance in hopes of seeing a true sequel in top shape after all. Thanks for watching.